Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. It's always wild seeing how far these stories travel. Now, imagine this. Micah Bell suddenly steps into the world of Far Cry 5. What happens next? Let's find out. Micah Bell doesn't arrive in Hope County with confusion or fear. The moment his boots hit the dirt roads lined with scripture-painted signs and hollow-eyed smiles, something clicks in his mind. This place isn't peaceful. It's restrained, the kind of quiet that only exists when violence is close enough that no one dares speak too loudly. Micah has lived his entire life reading rooms like this. He doesn't see farmland and churches. He sees pressure points, weak spots, people pretending they're safe because someone else told them they were. As he moves through the county, Micah notices the same patterns he's exploited before. Armed men who call themselves protectors. A leader who never needs to raise his voice because everyone already knows what happens if they don't listen. Eden's Gate doesn't feel foreign to him. It feels familiar, almost comforting in its cruelty. Where others see religious fanaticism, Micah sees organization, structure, control maintained not just through guns, but through belief. And Micah understands belief better than most. He's used it, twisted it, worn it like a disguise when it suited him. There's something else Micah picks up on almost immediately. Hope County isn't lawless. It's occupied. Every roadblock, every watchtower, every forced smile tells the same story. Someone owns this place. And to Micah Bell, ownership is just another word for opportunity. He watches how civilians avert their eyes. He listens to the way Peggies talk about Joseph's seed, not with love, but with reverence mixed with terror. That combination tells Micah everything he needs to know. This isn't loyalty earned, it's loyalty enforced. Micah doesn't rush to violence here. That's the mistake weaker men would make. Instead, he observes. He lets the tension of the county sink into his bones. He recognizes that this world runs on fear, and fear is a currency he spent his entire life collecting. In Hope County, chaos isn't random. It's managed, directed, and as Micah studies the system holding it all together, a dangerous thought begins to take shape in his mind. If chaos can be controlled, then maybe it can be redirected. By the time the first gunshots echo in the distance, Micah Bell is already smiling. Micah starts to test that idea quietly, the way a predator nudges the fence before deciding where to break through. He drifts between towns, camps, and half-forgotten roads, never staying long enough to be remembered, but always long enough to learn. He watches how Eden's Gate controls movement, how their patrols are just visible enough to be threatening, but distant enough to feel unavoidable. It's not brute force alone keeping Hope County in line. It's the certainty that resistance will be noticed. Micah respects that, not because he admires it, but because he recognizes it as effective. What really amuses him, though, is how fragile it all feels beneath the surface. For a cult that claims divine purpose, Eden's Gate relies heavily on human fear. Miss one patrol, let one rumor spread, allow one act of defiance to go unanswered. Micah can almost hear the structure creaking. He's seen gangs fall apart for less. He's seen men who thought themselves kings panic the moment their grip slipped. And Joseph Seed, for all his sermons and prophecies, is still just a man standing at the center of a carefully balanced lie. Micah begins to insert himself into the background noise of Hope County. A drink shared with the wrong person. A conversation nudged in the wrong direction. He doesn't need to incite rebellion. Not yet. All he needs is uncertainty. He asks questions that don't sound dangerous but linger uncomfortably. What happens if the seeds are wrong? What happens if the collapse doesn't come? What happens if all this suffering leads nowhere? He never argues. He lets doubt do the work for him. At the same time, Micah pays close attention to the resistance simmering beneath the surface. He spots it in clenched fists, in hurried whispers, in the way people look toward the mountains as if imagining escape. But he also sees their weakness. They're angry, but they're reactive. They want justice. They want revenge. Micah knows better. Hope County isn't a place that can be saved cleanly. It's a place that will burn slowly, no matter who lights the match. And that realization settles something in him. Micah doesn't feel like an outsider here anymore. The rules are different, the weapons more modern, but the game is the same. Power doesn't belong to the righteous. It belongs to those willing to exploit the moment when everyone else hesitates. In Hope County, everyone is waiting for a sign. From God, from a leader, from fate itself. Micah Bell doesn't wait for signs. He creates them. As the sun dips behind the mountains and the county slips back into its uneasy silence, Micah makes his decision. He won't fight this chaos head on. He won't try to destroy it outright. He's going to learn how it breathes, how it spreads, and how it can be turned against itself. Because in a place already drowning in fear, the most dangerous man isn't the one preaching the end of the world. It's the one who knows exactly how to make it feel closer. That choice changes the way Micah moves through Hope County. He stops thinking like a drifter passing through and starts thinking like a man sizing up a territory. Every cult outpost becomes a puzzle. Every sermon broadcast over stolen radios becomes a signal to study cadence, repetition, control. Micah listens closely to Joseph Seed's words, not for meaning, but for rhythm. He notices how often Joseph speaks about sacrifice, how rarely he speaks about survival. That distinction matters. Leaders who promise salvation after suffering often forget that people still want to live long enough to see it. Micah begins to understand the emotional economy of Eden's Gate. Fear keeps people obedient, but exhaustion keeps them compliant. The cult pushes its followers just far enough that they don't have the energy to question, only to endure. It's clever, dangerous, and flawed. Micah has always known that desperation can be pointed in different directions, depending on who whispers last. In Hope County, everyone is tired of waiting, tired of believing, tired of pretending this was ever about faith instead of control. He also notices something Joseph Seed doesn't account for: boredom. Armed men standing guard day after day start to look for meaning in their violence. Some become crueler, others hesitate. Micah sees both types and files them away. He knows which ones would enjoy being unleashed, and which ones might fold if pushed hard enough. Chaos doesn't erupt all at once here. It seeps through cracks, and Micah knows exactly how to widen them. As days pass, Micah's presence becomes less invisible. Not because he's loud, but because he's effective. Problems resolve themselves around him. Arguments end in silence. People stop asking questions when he's nearby, but they listen more closely when he speaks. There's no ideology behind his words, no promise of paradise or freedom, just clarity, just certainty. And in a place drowning in prophecy and fear, that kind of confidence feels intoxicating. Micah realizes Hope County is a pressure cooker, waiting for someone reckless enough to adjust the valve. The Seeds believe they're preparing for the end of the world, but Micah sees something else entirely. A rehearsal for collapse that never needed God to begin with. All it takes is one man who understands that order built on fear can never tell the difference between loyalty and opportunity. By the time Micah rides past another shrine lit by candles and scripture, he doesn't sneer or scoff. He nods, almost respectfully. Not because he believes, but because he recognizes craftsmanship. This cult was built by someone who understands control. And Micah Bell has never been interested in tearing down structures just to watch them fall. He prefers to stand inside them, find the weakest support, and lean. Slowly, patiently, until everything starts to come apart on its own. In Hope County, chaos already has a name and a voice. Micah isn't here to replace it. He's here to show it how much worse it can get. That understanding settles into Micah like a familiar itch, the kind that tells him he's exactly where he belongs. Hope County doesn't need a spark. It's already smoldering. What it lacks is someone willing to stand close enough to the fire without flinching. Micah has never been afraid of getting burned. In fact, he's always trusted the heat to reveal who people really are. And in this place, where faith is enforced at gunpoint and silence is mistaken for peace, the truth is begging to surface. Micah starts to see the county as a living thing, tense and coiled, every road leading back to the same source of pressure. The seeds believe they are shepherds guiding lost souls toward salvation, but Micah knows a cage when he sees one. And cages breed two kinds of creatures: those who submit and those who learn exactly where the bars are weakest. He doesn't interfere yet. He lets the system continue just long enough to expose its own limits. Every crackdown, every forced confession, every public display of obedience tightens the noose a little more. What fascinates Micah most is how predictable it all becomes. The cult reacts the same way every time it's challenged: overwhelm, intimidate, make an example. They believe fear can only move in one direction. Micah understands something Joseph Seed doesn't. Fear can turn. When people stop fearing punishment and start fearing the endlessness of it, control begins to rot from the inside. That's the moment Micah lives for. The moment when obedience transforms into resentment, and resentment into something far more volatile. He feels no urge to save anyone here. There's no Arthur Morgan inside him looking for redemption, no moral weight slowing his hand. Hope County isn't a tragedy to Micah. It's a proving ground. A place where belief, violence, and desperation collide, and only the most adaptable survive. He isn't offended by Joseph Seed's God complex. He's amused by it. Men who claim divine authority often forget they can still bleed. As night settles across the valleys and the distant sound of hymns drifts through the trees, Micah stands apart from it all, listening. Not to the prayers, but to the silence between them. That silence is where fear hides, where doubt grows, where people start imagining alternatives they're too afraid to say out loud. Micah doesn't preach to that silence. He waits, because sooner or later, someone will break it. And when they do, Micah Bell will be ready, not as a savior, not as a believer, but as a man who recognized chaos the moment he stepped into it, and understood it wasn't something to escape from. It was something to shape. Micah doesn't announce himself to Eden's Gate. He lets them find him the way they find everyone else in Hope County. Slowly, deliberately, under the assumption that resistance is inevitable. When the Peggies finally surround him, rifles raised and scripture ready on their tongues, Micah doesn't reach for his gun. He smiles. Not a friendly smile, not a mocking one, but the kind that suggests he already understands how this conversation ends. That alone unsettles them. Men trained to break others aren't used to someone who looks comfortable at the moment of capture. He listens while they speak, about salvation, about Joseph Seed, about the collapse that's coming, whether people believe or not. Micah nods at the right moments, asks careful questions, never challenging their authority outright. He's done this before with gang leaders and lawmen alike. Power, he knows, doesn't fear submission. It expects it. And so Micah offers exactly that, just enough to pass unnoticed. A man without a past, a sinner willing to be reshaped. Eden's Gate loves stories like that. They need them. Life among the Peggies is rigid, repetitive, and soaked in quiet menace. Chores, patrols, sermons that blur together under the Montana sky. Micah absorbs it all without complaint. He learns who enforces the rules and who merely recites them. He notices which guards enjoy their authority and which ones are afraid of losing it. The cult believes constant structure creates unity, but Micah understands what it really creates: hierarchy. And hierarchy always leaves room for someone ruthless enough to climb. Violence becomes Micah's currency. Not reckless violence, not emotional outbursts, but precise, performative brutality. When Eden's Gate demands punishment, Micah delivers it without hesitation. He doesn't overdo it. He doesn't relish it openly. He treats it like work. That terrifies people more than cruelty ever could. Soon the Peggies stop watching him to make sure he obeys. They start watching him to see how far he'll go. Micah never speaks of belief. He speaks of order, of strength, of how the weak invite suffering by refusing to accept their place. His words echo the cult's teachings closely enough to sound loyal, but they strip away the spiritual comfort and leave only the iron framework underneath. Some Peggies respond to that clarity immediately. Others flinch, sensing the truth in it but afraid of what it says about them. Either way, Micah leaves an impression. By the time Micah is trusted with a weapon again, he's already learned more than Eden's Gate realizes. Their routines, their blind spots, the way fear flows downward through the ranks, never upward. The seeds preach unity, but Micah sees fragmentation everywhere. Faith holds them together, but fear keeps them in place. And fear, Micah knows, can be redirected. As Micah settles deeper into the cult's inner machinery, he doesn't feel like a convert. He feels like an infection the body hasn't noticed yet. Micah's rise among the Peggies is quiet but unmistakable. No ceremony marks it, no official promotion, yet suddenly his name carries weight. When patrols go wrong, someone suggests asking Micah. When a dissenter won't fall in line, Micah is sent instead of a sermon. He never questions the orders, never asks for recognition. He understands something the cult does not. Authority feels more natural when it appears unclaimed. People trust what seems inevitable. He begins to mirror Eden's Gate just enough to feel familiar. He quotes scripture without reverence, using it as punctuation rather than belief. He repeats Joseph Seed's phrases but strips them of poetry, turning prophecy into instruction. The Peggies don't notice the shift at first. They only feel that things run smoother when Micah is involved. Fewer arguments, faster compliance. Fear delivered cleanly and efficiently. To them, that feels like progress. But beneath that surface, Micah is studying their cracks. He sees how faith thins the higher you climb. The foot soldiers cling to belief because it gives meaning to what they've done. The lieutenants cling to power because belief alone stopped being enough. Micah has no need for either. That makes him dangerous. He isn't bound by prophecy or hierarchy. He's bound only by opportunity. Some Peggies start to imitate him, not his words, but his demeanor. The calm, the lack of doubt. They stop asking Joseph's name before acting and start watching Micah instead. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it shifts the emotional center of the room. Where Joseph Seed inspires awe from a distance, Micah commands attention up close. One is a voice over the radio. The other stands in front of you, unblinking. Micah tests loyalty in small ways. He suggests harsher patrols here, fewer there. A delayed response, a quicker punishment. He frames it all as efficiency, never rebellion. And when things don't immediately collapse, when the world doesn't end because someone bent the rules, a dangerous realization spreads through the ranks. The system is flexible, which means it can be reshaped. What Micah enjoys most is how easily the cult mistakes obedience for devotion. The Peggies follow orders because they're afraid not to. Micah follows orders because it keeps him close to the center. And from there, he starts to see Joseph Seed less as a prophet and more as a liability. A man whose power depends on faith staying intact. Micah's power depends on nothing staying sacred. By the time Micah is entrusted with leading small operations, Eden's Gate believes they've successfully broken him down and rebuilt him. They think they've turned a drifter into a believer. What they've really done is invite a predator into the den and taught him where the teeth are kept. Micah settles into leadership the way he settles into everything else. Comfortably, without hesitation, and without ever confusing responsibility for loyalty. He runs his operations efficiently, but not mercifully. Peggies under his command learn quickly that Micah doesn't punish failure out of anger. He punishes it to send a message. Every act of discipline is measured, intentional, and just visible enough to remind everyone watching that survival here depends on usefulness, Fear under Micah becomes quieter, sharper, and far more personal. What begins to change is the tone of the cult itself, at least in the spaces Micah touches. The sermons remain the same, but the aftermath doesn't. Where once there were long prayers and ritualized repentance, now there are swift consequences and immediate results. Some Peggies find comfort in that. The uncertainty of faith is replaced by the certainty of order. Others feel something slipping away, though they can't quite name it. Eden's Gate was supposed to be about salvation. Under Micah, it starts to feel like preparation for something much more earthly. Micah notices how often Joseph's seed removes himself from the day-to-day violence. The prophet speaks of suffering as necessity, but he rarely stands close enough to feel it. That distance matters. Micah has learned that people follow leaders they can see bleed, or at least imagine bleeding. Joseph's power comes from mystery. Micah's comes from presence. He stands where the guns are raised, where the shouting happens, where decisions turn permanent. Over time, the Peggies begin to associate order not with Joseph's voice, but with Micah's shadow. Rumors start to circulate quietly. That Micah understands the will of the Father better than most. That he acts without hesitation because his faith is pure. Micah never corrects them. He lets the lie grow legs. Faith, after all, is just a story repeated often enough that people stop checking where it came from. And Eden's Gate is built on stories. Micah is simply editing them. He also becomes aware of how the cult views the resistance, as sinners, as obstacles, as proof of prophecy. Micah sees them differently. They're pressure release, necessary opposition that keeps the cult from collapsing inward. He subtly alters tactics, allowing certain resistance acts to succeed while others are crushed mercilessly. To the Peggies, it feels like divine testing. To Micah, it's balance. Chaos managed, not eliminated. By now, Micah understands Eden's Gate better than many of its true believers. He knows which lieutenants crave approval, which fear replacement, which would turn violent the moment Joseph's authority wavered. He keeps mental notes, not out of paranoia, but preparation. Power, he knows, doesn't fall all at once. It erodes, one certainty at a time. And as Micah walks through cult compounds now, heads turn before he speaks. Conversations stop when he listens. He has become something Eden's Gate never intended to create. A figure who doesn't need prophecy to command obedience. Someone who thrives not on belief, but on the absence of it. And somewhere deep within the cult's carefully maintained order, a dangerous truth is beginning to form. Eden's Gate didn't convert Micah Bell. It gave him a stage. By the time Micah Bell is fully integrated among the Peggies, his presence has changed the rhythm of Eden's Gate without a single sermon of his own. He doesn't preach, he doesn't proselytize, and he doesn't act like he believes in Joseph's seed or his prophecy. Yet his influence spreads like a shadow in the sunlight. Subtle, inevitable, impossible to ignore. The Peggies begin to mirror his calm, measured ruthlessness. Orders are carried out more efficiently, but with less hesitation, less questioning. What Micah has learned is that the fear they've cultivated for years can be sharpened into a tool far more effective than devotion alone. Micah studies Joseph's seed closely, observing the cracks that faith can't hide. The preacher moves with authority, but his authority depends on people choosing to believe in it. Micah doesn't believe in anything, and that makes him unpredictable, which terrifies the cult more than anything else. When conflict arises, when someone falters, Micah doesn't need to consult doctrine or scripture to know what to do. He simply acts, and that decisiveness, that cold clarity, begins to outshine Joseph's charisma in the eyes of the Peggies who watch him the closest. He begins to manipulate small operations, letting certain resistance cells slip through while crushing others mercilessly. To Eden's Gate, it looks like divine guidance, a test from the Father himself. To Micah, it's strategy, experimentation, and control. Every choice, every action, every controlled outcome reinforces what he already knows, that this world, with all its cultish rules and prophecy-laden speeches, is just another stage for the most adaptable and ruthless man in it. Micah has no illusions about morality or loyalty, only opportunity and leverage. Micah also understands that fear is contagious, but so is confidence. The cult's foot soldiers start to emulate his behavior without realizing it. Quiet decisiveness becomes a benchmark. Calm cruelty becomes admired. The Peggies who were once consumed by religious fervor now begin to respect efficiency and presence more than doctrine. This doesn't go unnoticed by Micah. He is meticulous, always recording reactions, storing knowledge like bullets in a gun. One day, the same fear that keeps them in line could be turned against them, and he will know exactly which strings to pull. Even Joseph Seed senses the shift, though he misinterprets it. He believes that Micah is another lost soul, a test from God meant to strengthen his flock or punish the unfaithful. The preacher observes him carefully, offering cryptic guidance, measuring his obedience, assessing his faith. Micah smiles politely, nods, and keeps walking. He doesn't need Joseph's approval. He doesn't need the cult's belief. He only needs their actions, their compliance, and the gaps in their control. He has learned that faith is fragile, but manipulation is eternal. As Micah moves among the Peggies, he experiments with power in the smallest ways. A suggestion here, a correction there, a deliberate indulgence of one fear while ignoring another. Each adjustment is subtle, almost invisible to anyone who isn't paying attention. Yet, over time, the effect compounds. Discipline becomes sharper, obedience faster, and the emotional control of Eden's Gate more brittle than anyone realizes. The seeds of chaos Micah plants are growing, not through violence, but through the very structure the cult prides itself on maintaining. At the same time, Micah observes the human side of the cult. The people who follow not out of devotion but fear, habit, or hope. He watches how they cling to one another, how they justify cruelty as loyalty, how they rationalize suffering as salvation. He doesn't judge, he studies. He knows that when the right moment comes, the tension of their fear and devotion can be redirected in ways that Joseph Seed never imagined. Hope County itself has become a laboratory for him, each interaction a carefully recorded experiment in power, obedience, and human weakness. As the sun sets over the valleys and the chants of Eden's Gate echo faintly in the distance, Micah walks through the compound with a casual, measured gait. The Peggies step aside instinctively. His presence alone alters the energy in the room. He doesn't speak, he doesn't shout, and yet everyone knows he is in command of the situation. Not because of belief, not because of prophecy, but because of the quiet confidence that only a man with no allegiance can wield. By the time night fully blankets Hope County, Micah Bell has done more than survive among the Peggies. He has reshaped them without ever revealing his hand. He has learned their patterns, their weaknesses, and their fears. He has proven that a man does not need faith to control those who cling to it. And somewhere deep in the heart of Eden's Gate, a dangerous question begins to form in the minds of those who serve. Who really holds the power here? Joseph Seed, or the man who walks among them, smiling quietly, and already knows how this story ends. This is the man who has learned the language of fear, who moves through devotion like water through a channel, and who now understands something no cult can teach. The most dangerous person in a world built on belief is the one who believes in nothing at all. Micah Bell doesn't stay in the shadows forever. Inevitably, his presence draws attention, and the man who notices first is Joseph Seed himself. The preacher watches quietly at first, studying the drifter who seems too calm, too precise, too unshakable to be just another recruit. Joseph has built his world on the idea that he can see into men's souls, that he can divine their purpose and align it with the will of God. But Micah doesn't fit that pattern. Micah doesn't belong to any system, to any moral compass, to any prophecy. He is a force that cannot be predicted, and that alone draws Joseph out of his sermons and into direct confrontation. Their first meeting is quiet, almost mundane, but loaded with tension. Joseph's eyes measure, searching for fear, for doubt, for some flicker of submission. Micah's eyes meet his without hesitation, with a calm that borders on defiance, yet not challenge. He doesn't need to speak to assert himself. His posture, his silence, his very presence is a message. I am here, I see, and I do not bend. Joseph tries to probe, offering words that carry the weight of faith and prophecy, suggesting that perhaps Micah has a purpose he cannot yet see. Micah smiles faintly, nods politely, and waits. He doesn't take the bait, and Joseph notices. That quiet refusal to play by Eden's Gate rules unsettles him more than outright rebellion ever could. The tension between the two men escalates naturally, like two predators circling one another in the underbrush. Joseph relies on influence, on belief, on the fear of the unknown to control his world. Micah relies on calculation, on instinct, and on the knowledge that fear is a tool, not a truth. Their conversations are calm, deliberate, polite on the surface, but underneath every word lies a challenge. Joseph speaks of sacrifice and destiny, of visions and the inevitability of collapse, attempting to draw Micah into a moral framework. Micah speaks of survival and clarity, of consequences and opportunity, demonstrating in subtle ways that he is unbound by morality or prophecy. To Joseph, it feels like a test, a puzzle, a way to measure the faith of his flock against the unpredictability of the world. To Micah, it is simply a negotiation of influence, a study in how power can be wielded without allegiance. What begins to unfold is not just a meeting of two men, but a collision of philosophies. Joseph's seed believes in order through faith, in loyalty through divine fear, in the ultimate power of conviction. Micah Bell believes in order through action, in loyalty through leverage, in the ultimate power of opportunity. They are two apex predators occupying the same space, each measuring the other, each aware that even a single misstep could shift the balance of power. The Peggies and the foot soldiers, once unquestioning in their obedience, now begin to sense that something has changed. Authority is no longer absolute. The line between leader and interloper, between prophet and predator, begins to blur. Micah starts to manipulate the environment subtly, using what he has learned among the Peggies to test Joseph's reactions. Minor deviations in routine, small allowances for resistance, hints of disorder in operations. All are deliberate. Joseph notices the anomalies, but cannot fully understand their cause. The seeds of doubt begin to take root, not in the belief of the followers, but in the structure Joseph depends on to maintain control. Micah does not overtly challenge the prophet. He doesn't need to. Control is not seized with force alone. Influence is far more powerful, especially when wielded silently and strategically. The very mechanisms of Eden's Gate begin to shift without anyone realizing that the shift is deliberate. At the same time, Micah watches Joseph with a predator's patience. He notes the preacher's patterns, the rhythm of his speeches, the subtle tells when he feels threatened, the way he distances himself from direct conflict, yet expects absolute obedience. Joseph assumes his authority is unassailable, but Micah understands that authority is only as strong as the fear and belief it commands, and fear, like everything else, can be turned. Micah begins to imagine the possibilities. A cult fractured from within, obedience redirected, prophecy twisted by human cunning. The idea is intoxicating, and for the first time, Micah feels not just the thrill of survival, but the potential of dominion over a place already built on control. The first outward signs of their clash of wills are almost imperceptible. Decisions Joseph makes are delayed slightly, not because Micah forces him, but because he has introduced subtle instability into the system. Orders are carried out more rigidly by those under Micah's influence, sometimes contradicting instructions from higher up, sometimes bending the rules just enough to create confusion. The Peggies begin to sense tension between the two men, though none of them can articulate it clearly. They see Micah moving confidently through the compound, quietly correcting procedures, quietly demonstrating competence, and they start to wonder if the real authority has shifted. Joseph feels it too, a niggling doubt that he masks with sermons and prayers. But the predator's instinct in him recognizes that Micah is no ordinary threat. Every interaction between Joseph and Micah becomes a chess match disguised as conversation. Words carry double meanings, suggestions are tests, questions are traps. Both men are fully aware that one false move could destabilize the carefully maintained hierarchy of Eden's Gate, but neither shows hesitation. Joseph relies on prophecy to guide his strategy, but prophecy cannot account for a man who has no allegiance, no conscience, and no belief. Micah relies on observation, calculation, and instinct, tools that are perfectly suited for exploiting a system built on faith and fear. And so they circle one another, polite and controlled in public, dangerous and deliberate in every glance and gesture, creating a tension that radiates through the compound and begins to affect everyone in its orbit. Micah realizes that direct confrontation with Joseph's seed isn't necessary to assert influence. The very presence of two apex predators in the same territory creates a ripple effect. Minor operational errors, subtle disobedience, and quiet shifts in behavior among the Peggies become magnified because both men command attention. Followers are caught between two forces, unsure where ultimate authority lies. And in that uncertainty lies Micah's advantage. He doesn't need to overthrow Joseph. He only needs to exist as a constant, unyielding variable in Eden's Gate's carefully ordered world. The seeds of internal chaos once planted grow quietly but relentlessly. The first true test of this collision comes when a routine mission goes off script, engineered subtly by Micah to probe Joseph's response. He allows a small group of resistance fighters to escape while crushing another, creating inconsistency in the cult's operations. Joseph notices immediately, frustration flickering behind the calm mask of the prophet. He demands explanations, yet the chain of command Micah has touched remains obliquely compliant. Every report returns to Joseph as technically correct, yet the outcome is shifted subtly, unpredictably. Micah watches the seeds of doubt sprout in the eyes of those who carry out orders, the quiet questions that arise in the minds of believers. The first cracks in Eden's Gate's facade begin to appear, not through open rebellion, but through subtle manipulation. The hallmark of Micah Bell's strategy, and the beginning of a dangerous game only he truly understands. This is where the predator's dance truly begins. Joseph's seed recognizes finally that Micah is no ordinary follower. Micah recognizes that Joseph is both dangerous and exploitable. Two men, apex predators in a territory built on fear and belief, now face one another in a silent battle of wits, patience, and control. Every gesture, every decision, every word is loaded with consequence. And somewhere in the hills and valleys of Hope County, the people under their influence begin to feel the subtle tremor of an invisible war being waged around them, one they cannot see, but one whose effects will shape the fate of the entire county. The stage is set for a collision that is as psychological as it is strategic. Neither man has the intention of losing, and yet each knows that only one can ultimately define the future of Eden's Gate. Micah Bell has arrived not just to survive, but to test, to manipulate, and to prove that a predator unbound by faith can thrive in a world obsessed with belief. And Joseph Seed, the man who believes he can see the end, now realizes that he may have underestimated a force unlike anything Hope County has ever seen. The tension between them hangs in the air like electricity before a storm. Every movement, every glance, every interaction carries weight. And as the sun dips below the mountains, casting long shadows over the compound, it becomes clear that Hope County itself has become a battleground. Not for bullets or bombs, but for dominance, for influence, for control over minds that have been trained to obey. This is the beginning of a clash that neither will fight openly, but whose consequences will ripple outward in ways that no one, not even the prophet, can fully predict. Their dance has only just begun, and the rules are simple. In a world built on fear, the cleverest predator doesn't need to kill first. He only needs to survive, adapt, and outlast. In this game, Micah Bell has already learned the first and most important lesson. Patience is a weapon, observation is power, and a man who believes in nothing can challenge a man who believes in everything. The quiet war between predator and prophet is underway, and Hope County is caught in the middle, unknowing yet utterly affected by the tension of two forces that cannot coexist peacefully. The tension between Joseph Seed and Micah Bell deepens with each passing day, a silent battle that everyone around them begins to feel, even if they cannot name it. Micah doesn't seek confrontation, and Joseph doesn't yet fully understand the threat. Instead, their conflict plays out in subtle shifts, a patrol conducted slightly differently, an order obeyed with minimal deviation, a whispered suggestion that seems innocuous but plants doubt. The Peggies begin to notice the change in rhythm, the small inconsistencies, and though no one dares speak openly, their instincts tell them that something fundamental is shifting. Micah understands instinct. He knows the power of perception, and he uses it carefully, deliberately, like a blade pressed against the throat of Eden's gate. Joseph, meanwhile, tries to maintain control with his usual combination of charisma and prophecy, but he is forced into constant recalibration. Every subtle act of Micah's is a test of his patience, a probe into the limits of his influence. Joseph has spent years building his followers into a machine that reacts predictably to fear and devotion, but Micah operates outside that machine. He is a variable that cannot be calculated, a man who follows no doctrine and fears no divine retribution. That unpredictability unnerves Joseph more than outright defiance ever could. Faith may command obedience, but it cannot command insight. It cannot anticipate a predator who sees everything as an opportunity. Micah begins to escalate his influence through controlled acts of chaos, small disruptions designed to test loyalties. He allows a miscommunication in one operation, delays another patrol by a few minutes, and observes the results. The outcomes are subtle but significant. Soldiers question orders quietly, leaders pause before acting, and the flow of authority begins to feel less absolute. The Peggies start to sense the cracks forming in a structure they once thought unbreakable. They are not sure whether this is divine testing, a trick of the enemy, or something else entirely, but the effect is undeniable. Micah doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to wield a weapon. The quiet assertion of his presence is enough to alter the dynamic of the entire cult. Even Joseph begins to notice the change, though he cannot fully understand it. The quiet confidence Micah exudes, the way he moves among the followers, the precision with which he executes orders without hesitation or doubt, all of it begins to eclipse the prophet's carefully cultivated aura of omnipotence. Followers start to glance at Micah when seeking guidance, even when Joseph is present. Some see the calm efficiency, the unwavering resolve, and interpret it as divine favor. Others sense a subtle danger, an unpredictability that the prophecy cannot account for. Either way, the balance of power is shifting, and Joseph knows that, if left unchecked, it could threaten everything he has built. Micah, for his part, watches Joseph closely, noting not just his words, but his silences, the small gestures that betray frustration or calculation. He studies the ways Joseph delegates, the hierarchy he relies upon, and the unseen pressures that govern every decision. Every sermon, every command, every ritual becomes data for Micah, evidence of where authority can be bent, where fear can be redirected, and where loyalty is conditional rather than absolute. Micah does not act recklessly. He does not seek to overthrow Joseph outright. Instead, he studies, waits, and manipulates subtly, setting the stage for a larger game that only he fully comprehends. The clash of these two predators begins to influence not just the leaders themselves, but the entire ecosystem of Hope County. The Peggies become tense, the officers uncertain, the resistance confused by the small inconsistencies in the cult's operations. The atmosphere is charged, every interaction laced with an invisible weight, and no one can predict when the next shift will occur. The presence of two apex predators in the same territory amplifies every decision, every word, every glance. Micah doesn't need to confront Joseph openly. The mere fact that he exists, unyielding and unbound, creates ripples through Eden's Gate that are impossible to ignore. By now, Micah understands that patience is as deadly as violence. He knows the power of observation, of subtle influence, of bending a system from within rather than breaking it outright. Joseph Seed, for all his insight into human nature and divine destiny, has never faced someone who operates purely on instinct and calculation, a man who answers to no God and fears nothing. The psychological battlefield between them grows with every interaction, and Hope County itself becomes a silent participant in this war. Every follower, every decision, every patrol is now part of the tension, a reflection of the invisible contest between belief and cunning, prophecy and pragmatism, fear and control. Micah does not rush the end game. He has learned that dominance comes slowly, measured in small increments that compound over time. He allows Joseph to believe that he is still the uncontested prophet, while quietly reshaping the flow of power around him. The collision between predator and prophet is no longer theoretical. It is real, tangible, and unavoidable. Hope County, for all its sermons, rituals, and faith, is now a hunting ground, not just for survival, but for the assertion of a new kind of control, one built not on prophecy, but on strategy, observation, and the terrifying precision of a man who has learned to thrive where others are bound by belief. This is the calm before the storm. Every smile, every gesture, every order carries hidden meaning. And as the days pass, it becomes clear that the war between Joseph Seed and Micah Bell is no longer confined to whispered doubts or subtle disruptions. It is a collision of predators, each testing the other, each aware that the other's capabilities are extraordinary. Hope County is alive with tension, and every heartbeat of the land seems to echo the unspoken rule. In a place built on fear and belief, the cleverest predator doesn't wait for opportunity. He creates it. The tension between Joseph Seed and Micah Bell reaches a point where subtlety is no longer just a strategy. It becomes a language all its own. Micah doesn't shout. He doesn't openly defy. Yet his every move carries meaning, a quiet assertion of power that reverberates through Eden's Gate without words. When a patrol fails to capture a resistance cell, when a ritual is carried out with more precision than required, when a decision is quietly questioned or rerouted, the ripple spreads. Joseph sees the changes, but he cannot pinpoint the cause. To him, prophecy has always been absolute, divine judgment unerring. Micah is something else entirely. Micah is unbound, unpredictable, and utterly human. And that is far more dangerous than any imagined apocalypse. Micah begins to exploit the spaces where Joseph's authority is weakest. He allows small acts of disobedience to occur, not recklessly, but intentionally, observing how leaders react, how soldiers interpret instructions, and how followers rationalize inconsistency. He introduces minor strategic errors that create ambiguity, letting the machinery of the cult reveal its own vulnerabilities. Every delayed command, every quietly subverted mission, every misaligned patrol is a calculated move, designed to make Joseph's perfect order seem less certain. And as the followers adjust, as they hesitate and question, Micah sits back and watches, his mind constantly cataloging the outcomes. Hope County itself becomes his laboratory, The first true friction between the two men occurs during a mid-mission review. Joseph expects full compliance. Micah delivers efficiency, but not obedience in the way the prophet imagines. He follows the letter of the law while bending its spirit, executing operations in ways that achieve results while undermining the illusion of control. Joseph senses the subtle insubordination immediately. His calm mask slips for just a moment, enough for the Peggies to notice. Micah does not press the advantage. He allows the tension to exist, to simmer. That moment of uncertainty is more valuable than confrontation. Every second Joseph hesitates, every decision weighed with doubt, Micah's influence grows. Micah's approach is surgical. He never overtly challenges Joseph, but he never yields either. Conversations between the two are polite, formal, and dripping with subtext. Joseph speaks of prophecy, of faith, of divine destiny. Micah replies with observation, with practicality, with insight that doesn't contradict the faith outwardly, but exposes the limitations of its implementation. The Peggies overhear these exchanges, sensing that a quiet power struggle exists, yet they cannot identify its source. Micah has mastered the art of subtle domination, asserting authority not through fear alone, but through competence, presence, and the perception that he knows more than anyone around him. The cult's daily rhythm begins to bend around him. Orders are executed more efficiently, but followers start looking for cues from Micah rather than Joseph. Miscommunication that once triggered outrage now creates silent hesitation. Even minor errors, missed targets, delayed patrols, slight deviations from ritual become tools for him to measure obedience and loyalty. Joseph can sense the subtle shift, the growing influence of a man who does not fear him, yet cannot fully control him. The prophet begins to realize that authority is no longer absolute. Micah's quiet manipulations are creating instability, and Eden's gate, once thought impenetrable, is revealing cracks from within. Every interaction between predator and prophet is now a test, an exercise in strategy and psychology. Micah studies Joseph with the same intensity he once applied to gang leaders and lawmen, noting habits, routines, and vulnerabilities. Joseph studies Micah, trying to discern intention, trying to read the soul of a man who seems impervious to faith or fear. Neither fully understands the other, yet both recognize the other as a threat. The Peggies feel the tension in their daily routines, the slightest pause in instruction, a subtle correction, a shift in patrol priorities, all echoing the invisible war that their leaders are waging. It is a war fought not with bullets, but with influence, perception, and control. Micah's most dangerous advantage is patience. He knows the power of waiting, of letting doubt grow slowly and invisibly. Joseph is used to being obeyed, used to seeing fear and faith align perfectly to maintain order. Micah has learned that true control comes not from immediate dominance, but from shaping behavior over time, from allowing others to act as if they are in charge while the real decisions have already been influenced. Hope County becomes a chessboard, every patrol, sermon, and ritual a piece in a game that only Micah fully understands. The prophet may have vision, but Micah has calculation, observation, and the willingness to exploit every flaw. As the days turn to weeks, the subtle battle intensifies. Followers begin whispering among themselves, sensing inconsistencies they cannot explain. Orders contradict each other, missions succeed in unexpected ways, and obedience carries a quiet tension that never existed before. Joseph struggles to maintain absolute authority, but his power is now constantly tested, bent in ways he cannot fully predict. Micah continues to move through Eden's gate like a shadow, quiet, calm, and unflinching. Yet his presence is felt everywhere. Influence, patience, and perception have become his weapons, and every minor disruption is a strategic blow in the war for the heart of the cult. The collision of these predators is no longer just personal. It is systemic. Eden's Gate itself begins to behave differently, as though the organization senses the unseen hand that guides it in subtle, untraceable ways. Joseph Seed remains the prophet in name, but his control over outcomes is challenged at every turn. Micah does not need to overthrow him. He only needs to exist in the space Joseph cannot fully dominate. The tension is electric, palpable to everyone within the county. The careful balance of faith, fear, and obedience that the cult depends on is no longer guaranteed. And in this charged environment, every move, every glance, every word carries weight that could tip the scales. Micah Bell has transformed Eden's Gate without raising a hand. His presence, patience, and precise manipulation have created a battlefield of minds, and Joseph Seed, for all his faith and prophecy, realizes that he has never encountered a threat like this. One that requires no weapons, no sermons, no followers, only the quiet, unyielding power of a man who thrives in chaos, who observes without allegiance, and who waits for the perfect moment to strike. Hope County itself becomes the stage for a war that is invisible yet unstoppable, a clash of predators that will shape the future of Eden's Gate in ways no one, not even the prophet, can fully predict. The clash between Micah Bell and Joseph Seed escalates, not with open warfare, but through the invisible currents of power that ripple through every corner of Eden's Gate. Micah does not confront the prophet directly. He doesn't issue ultimatums or challenge faith outright. Instead, he nudges, shifts, and tests, creating small pockets of unpredictability that spread like wildfire through the ranks. A patrol follows his subtle guidance. A ritual is executed with precision that highlights minor inefficiencies elsewhere. A whispered question about procedure causes hesitation in those who thought themselves unwavering. Every act is deliberate, calculated, and invisible to the untrained eye. Joseph notices the results, but cannot pinpoint the source. The prophet's faith in absolute control begins to crack under the weight of Micah's quiet influence. Micah thrives in this environment. While Joseph relies on doctrine and fear, Micah relies on observation and manipulation. He watches how each lieutenant reacts to small anomalies, how obedience can be bent without breaking entirely, and how faith can be used as a tool rather than a shield. Followers begin to act differently around him, seeking his guidance without realizing why. They sense certainty, efficiency, and an unflinching resolve that Joseph's distant charisma cannot match. Micah has learned to command presence without claiming allegiance, and Eden's Gate is beginning to respond, subtly but irrevocably, to his hand. The first open signs of tension erupt when a minor operation goes off the rails in a way that Joseph did not anticipate. Micah allowed a resistance cell to slip through deliberately, observing how the cult would react. Orders are executed technically correctly, yet outcomes diverge from expectation. Joseph's frustration is contained, his sermons continue, but the internal dynamics shift. Peggies begin to hesitate, leaders second-guess instructions, and the illusion of absolute obedience falters. Micah does not intervene to explain or justify. He lets the system self-correct while measuring its weaknesses. He understands that control is more powerful when it is earned through competence and perception rather than commanded by fear alone. Their encounters grow more charged, though still polite on the surface. Every conversation is a test, every glance a measure of power. Joseph seeks to assert authority through calm, measured words of prophecy, warning, and moral guidance. Micah counters with clarity, precision, and subtle challenges that expose the limitations of absolute belief. To Joseph, these exchanges feel like a trial by divine will, a test of his flock's obedience and his ability to foresee deviation. To Micah, it is simple strategy, understanding which elements of the system bend, which fracture, and which can be leveraged to shift the balance of power. Each interaction leaves ripples not immediately obvious, but cumulative, destabilizing the foundation of Eden's Gate one carefully observed action at a time. Micah's advantage lies in patience and perception. He understands that a cult built on fear and faith is vulnerable to internal shifts in confidence and consistency. He does not need to destroy Joseph's seed to assert influence. He only needs to exist in a way that challenges the certainty on which the prophet relies. Subtle disruptions, carefully timed decisions, and minor manipulations are enough to seed doubt among the leaders and soldiers, making every action and every instruction subject to questioning. This psychological tension spreads outward, affecting the entire ecosystem of Eden's Gate. Followers act differently, rituals lose their rigid predictability, and obedience becomes a fragile performance rather than an automatic response. Micah also studies the human dimension of the cult. He observes who doubts silently, who fears openly, who clings too tightly to authority, and who thrives under pressure. He catalogs each response, storing knowledge like ammunition for future exploitation. Eden's Gate believes in unity and divine order, yet Micah discovers that its cohesion depends as much on fear, habit, and perception as it does on faith. This insight gives him leverage invisible to anyone outside of his mind. He can bend the behavior of followers without overt coercion, guiding outcomes with subtle gestures, casual remarks, and silent observation. Every interaction with the Peggies, every decision Joseph's seed makes, every operational outcome becomes a piece in the game Micah is quietly playing. The real danger for Joseph is that Micah requires no loyalty, no faith, no moral compass, no prophecy governs his actions. Where Joseph assumes obedience stems from devotion, Micah proves that influence can grow from competence, perception, and the controlled application of uncertainty. The more Joseph tries to maintain control through sermons, displays of authority, and threats of divine punishment, the more he inadvertently highlights the contrast between faith-driven leadership and pragmatically calculated command. Followers begin to sense the difference even if they cannot articulate it. Obedience is no longer a matter of faith alone. Presence, precision, and silent power now compete alongside prophecy as forces commanding attention. Micah escalates the subtle conflict by exploiting minor cracks in Eden's Gate structure. He allows inconsistencies to persist long enough to reveal weaknesses, manipulates minor operations to test loyalty, and quietly shifts influence from those loyal to Joseph toward those who are flexible, observant, or ambitious. Each step is deliberate, measured, and invisible until the effects are undeniable. The cult begins to feel different, though no one can trace why. The tension in the air becomes palpable. Patrols that once ran smoothly now falter. Orders delivered with hesitation, small errors magnified by uncertainty. Eden's Gate's outward appearance of control remains intact, yet the internal dynamics are subtly, irreversibly shifting. Even Joseph recognizes the danger, though he misinterprets it as divine testing rather than human cunning. Micah's calm efficiency, his lack of fear, his quiet influence over the Peggies, and the way he bends outcomes without overtly challenging authority are unprecedented. Joseph cannot see the full picture, but he feels the pressure, the slow erosion of certainty, the tension in the ranks. Eden's Gate, built on prophecy, obedience, and faith, now contends with an entirely different type of predator, one whose strength is patience, observation, and a lack of belief. The psychological battlefield between the two apex predators extends outward, touching every layer of the cult. Leaders second-guess, followers hesitate, and even the most devout Peggies begin to notice inconsistencies in operations and enforcement. Minor deviations in routine ripple outward, magnified by perception and uncertainty. Every gesture, every word, every action in Eden's Gate is now colored by the presence of two forces vying for dominance, one guided by faith, the other by calculation. Hope County itself has become a stage for war fought in silence, observation, and subtle manipulation. Micah Bell has demonstrated that dominance does not require overt confrontation. Influence, patience, and understanding human behavior can be as powerful as doctrine, prophecy, or fear. He exists as a living disruption, a man who thrives in the space between faith and doubt, between obedience and chaos. Joseph Seed, for all his vision, charisma, and belief, now realizes that he faces a force unlike any before. A predator unbound by loyalty, morality, or divine law, moving quietly but inexorably toward control. The invisible war has begun, and the outcome will shape not only Eden's Gate, but the very future of Hope County itself. Micah Bell doesn't wait for Eden's Gate to make a mistake. He doesn't wait for resistance to rise, for Joseph Seed to falter, or for chaos to arrive organically. He creates it. Every movement, every decision, every quietly executed plan nudges Hope County closer to becoming a living battlefield. Roads once quiet under the weight of forced devotion now hum with tension. Patrols encounter unexpected obstacles, checkpoints report minor but consistent inconsistencies, and even the most loyal Peggies begin to sense that the world around them is subtly, dangerously unpredictable. Micah understands that fear alone cannot control a population indefinitely. It must be supplemented by the pressure of uncertainty, the constant reminder that the familiar rules no longer guarantee safety. He begins by exploiting the geography of the county itself. Every hidden valley, every overgrown path, every abandoned homestead becomes a potential stage for confrontation or ambush. Micah scouts locations quietly, noting vantage points, escape routes, and choke points. Resistance cells find themselves slipping through gaps he's deliberately created, while other missions collapse under carefully engineered circumstances. Every move is deliberate, every result calculated. To anyone observing, it looks like natural chaos, the unpredictable consequences of a county simmering under oppression. To Micah, it is a canvas being painted with the tension of fear, precision, and controlled violence. Communication lines within the cult begin to fray subtly, almost imperceptibly. Micah knows that a delay in orders, a misinterpreted command, or a single altered instruction can cascade through Eden's Gate, creating confusion without exposing his hand. He watches how messages travel, noting which lieutenants rely too heavily on Joseph's presence, which foot soldiers hesitate when authority is unclear, and which factions can be gently provoked to test loyalty. Each small disruption is magnified by human behavior, creating a network of uncertainty that spreads faster than any bullet could. Hope County begins to shift, the undercurrent of tension rising to a level where the slightest spark could ignite widespread conflict. Resistance fighters, who had long considered themselves outmatched and hunted, begin to notice subtle changes. Checkpoints are unattended, patrols arrive late, and opportunities to strike arise in places that previously would have been impossible. Micah does not intervene directly. He allows them just enough room to act, to encourage calculated rebellion, while retaining ultimate control of the situation. He observes how the Peggies respond to these insurgent actions, noting hesitation, overreaction, and misplaced aggression. Every action becomes a lesson, every response a clue, and Micah files it all away, building a comprehensive mental map of fear, loyalty, and potential chaos across the county. Micah's understanding of human psychology turns the entire county into a weapon. He exploits predictable reactions, subtle group dynamics, and the tension between obedience and self-preservation. Cult members begin to question their surroundings, to hesitate when executing orders, to second-guess their own judgment. He introduces minor conflicts between factions, encourages small acts of dissent, and observes without interference as Eden's Gate inadvertently destabilizes itself. The chaos grows organically, but every seed has been carefully planted, every line of tension quietly maintained, every potential eruption foreseen. He doesn't need to raise a weapon to turn Hope County into a battlefield. His presence alone shifts the balance of control. Soldiers follow his lead, consciously or not. Leaders pause before acting. Followers whisper and hesitate, sensing that the established order is no longer absolute. Micah understands that power is not measured solely by who holds the gun or the sermon. It is measured by whose decisions ripple through others, whose influence shapes outcomes before they happen, whose presence commands attention without demand. In this way, the county itself becomes a chessboard. Every road, every building, every patrol a piece in a game no one but Micah fully understands. Even the natural environment becomes an ally. Overgrown forests, rivers, mountains, and abandoned towns serve as both cover and traps. Micah leverages the terrain like a strategist who knows that terrain is as much a weapon as any rifle. Resistance fighters find new opportunities where they once saw only dead ends. Peggies become cautious where they once acted with blind obedience. Micah doesn't directly orchestrate ambushes. He engineers conditions so that the ambushes occur naturally, flowing from the behavior of those around him. The result is an escalating tension where every encounter carries the weight of unpredictability, and every misstep could ignite a full-blown battle. As he watches Eden's Gate respond to these subtle manipulations, Micah begins to orchestrate the psychological aspects of conflict as meticulously as the physical. Rumors are allowed to spread, whispers encouraged, and small disagreements magnified until they threaten cohesion. Followers who once obeyed unquestioningly now hesitate. Questions that were never asked begin to circulate quietly among lieutenants and foot soldiers. The tension reaches a point where even Joseph Seed, whose faith has guided the cult for years, cannot account for every shift, every hesitation, every subtle failure. Hope County itself has become a living, breathing battlefield, one shaped by fear, perception, and the careful hand of a man who knows exactly how to manipulate both. Every mission, every patrol, every interaction is now an opportunity for Micah to test the limits of control. He watches the Peggies flinch, redirect, and falter under subtle pressure. Resistance fighters grow bold, emboldened by gaps he has introduced. Civilian areas become unstable, teetering between quiet compliance and eruptive rebellion. Micah does not need to intervene directly in every confrontation. He has learned that chaos can be cultivated, guided, and amplified with the smallest nudges. Hope County is no longer a static landscape of control and obedience. It is alive, charged with tension, and waiting for the first overt spark to ignite a series of events that could reshape the county entirely. And through it all, Micah Bell remains a silent force in the middle of it, watching, calculating, and shaping outcomes without ever raising his voice or showing allegiance. Every subtle act of disruption, every carefully engineered opportunity, every quiet observation contributes to a larger strategy, turning Eden's Gate and all of Hope County into a controlled battlefield where outcomes favor the man who understands fear, opportunity, and human behavior better than anyone else. The stage is set, the forces in motion, and the county trembles with potential energy, waiting for the moment when calculated chaos becomes undeniable, and every thread of power woven by Joseph's seed is tested by the predator who walks among them. Micah doesn't just rely on subtlety. He begins to push the boundaries of Eden's Gate's control more openly, but still with precision. Small skirmishes between resistance fighters and Peggies escalate under his watch, yet he carefully ensures they never become uncontrollable. Every encounter is a calculated test of both faith and fear. He watches the reactions of lieutenants as patrols are ambushed or missions fail, noting who adapts, who panics, and who clings blindly to Joseph's instructions. Micah knows that fear alone cannot sustain authority indefinitely, but pressure paired with uncertainty can fracture even the most disciplined organization. He cultivates that uncertainty intentionally, letting Eden's Gate reveal its weaknesses in real time without ever exposing himself to risk. He also begins to exploit the county's communication networks. Orders, reports, and updates are subtly altered or delayed, creating minor disruptions that ripple through the ranks. A message sent late, an instruction misinterpreted, or a patrol misdirected is enough to introduce tension and confusion without appearing intentional. Micah tracks the outcomes meticulously, noting which errors create the greatest hesitation and which inspire immediate corrective action. In this way, he turns the very structure of Eden's Gate into a tool, using the cult's own systems against itself while the followers remain unaware of his hand in the chaos. Micah extends his manipulation to the human element of the county itself. Civilians caught between the cult and the resistance become unwitting participants in his orchestration. Their fear, hesitation, and occasional rebellion serve as both feedback and catalyst for larger disruptions. Micah uses this to his advantage, allowing small pockets of unrest to appear natural, amplifying the perception that Eden's Gate's control is slipping. The Peggies interpret these events as divine tests, not realizing that a man who fears nothing and believes in nothing is actively shaping outcomes at every level. Hope County, once a controlled environment, begins to pulse with tension like a living organism, responsive to the predator guiding its invisible currents. Physical confrontations become more frequent, yet they are still calculated. Resistance fighters capitalize on opportunities Micah quietly engineers, exploiting vulnerabilities in patrols and checkpoints that appear coincidental but are carefully planned. Peggies respond with aggression, but Micah ensures that retaliation is contained, measured, and predictable, reinforcing the sense that failure is never without consequence while maintaining the illusion that chaos is organic. Every small skirmish, every clash of forces becomes a lesson in both fear and opportunity, further establishing Micah's understanding of the county as a battlefield and himself as the unseen hand controlling its dynamics. The psychological impact of his actions is as significant as the physical. Peggies who once acted with unquestioning obedience begin to hesitate, second-guess, and subtly compete for influence. Lieutenants notice minor inconsistencies in mission outcomes and begin to wonder who is truly responsible for them. Even Joseph Seed senses a disturbance in the usual order, but cannot identify its source. The tension spreads, infecting the hierarchy from the top down. Eden's Gate, a cult that once operated on the certainty of divine authority, now feels the pressure of uncertainty at every level. Micah has transformed fear into a weapon, uncertainty into a tool, and the entire county into a controlled battlefield. Micah also leverages the county's natural geography with increasing sophistication. Forests, rivers, mountains, and abandoned towns are used to channel resistance, isolate Peggies, and manipulate outcomes. Ambushes and escapes occur as if by chance, yet every element has been studied and influenced. The environment itself becomes part of the strategy, amplifying the unpredictability of the county and forcing both the Peggies and Joseph Seed to confront circumstances they cannot fully control. Micah's understanding of terrain, human behavior, and timing turns the very landscape into a force multiplier for chaos. As operations intensify, resistance cells grow bolder, emboldened by gaps Micah has orchestrated. They strike with precision, often at unexpected locations, and while Joseph's forces respond with aggression, they are increasingly reacting to conditions Micah has created rather than controlling them. Civilians caught in the crossfire become pawns in a larger game, their fear and uncertainty manipulated to further destabilize Eden's Gate. The county becomes a dynamic battlefield, with every road, every settlement, every forest, and every hill a theater for Micah's carefully calculated manipulation. Through it all, Micah maintains an almost invisible presence. He does not lead attacks openly. He does not issue commands to the resistance. He does not confront Joseph directly. Yet his influence is everywhere. The county pulses with tension, uncertainty, and controlled chaos. Eden's Gate operates with less certainty. Resistance strikes with greater opportunity. and the balance of power shifts subtly but unmistakably. Micah Bell has succeeded in transforming Hope County into a battlefield where the rules are no longer fixed, where every decision carries weight, and where the predator who understands fear, perception, and human behavior holds the unseen advantage. The stage is set for something far larger than skirmishes and subtle manipulation. Micah has reshaped the county without raising a hand, without declaring allegiance, and without violating the illusion of order. Eden's Gate is destabilized, the resistance empowered, and Joseph's seed is forced to reckon with an enemy who does not obey prophecy, fear, or faith. Every aspect of Hope County, its terrain, its people, its cult, its resistance, has been turned into instruments in a quiet, relentless campaign of control and chaos, orchestrated by a man who thrives in uncertainty and dominates without overt action. The battlefield is ready, and Micah Bell is the architect behind every invisible line of tension, every calculated ripple of fear, and every opportunity waiting to be seized. The tension in Hope County reaches a point where the distinction between order and chaos becomes almost meaningless. Micah Bell has orchestrated a landscape where every action carries consequence, and every decision, no matter how small, has the potential to ripple outward unpredictably. Peggies who once acted with absolute certainty now hesitate. Lieutenants second-guess one another, searching for guidance that Joseph's seed can no longer guarantee in the subtle yet profound ways Micah has influenced operations. The resistance begins to operate in ways that feel both organic and opportunistic, unaware that their apparent successes are meticulously curated by the predator moving silently among the Peggies. Micah has turned uncertainty into leverage, and leverage into power. Physical confrontation now occur with increasing frequency, yet they are carefully contained. Micah allows minor clashes between resistance and cult forces, observing, measuring, and adjusting outcomes in real time. He knows when to permit a skirmish to succeed, when to let a retreat appear strategic, and when to let failure teach a lesson. Each encounter reinforces his control over the battlefield. Every victory, every loss, every hesitation becomes a data point, a lesson in human behavior, and a test of loyalty. Eden's Gate, for all its rituals and sermons, begins to operate according to rules it cannot fully comprehend, with outcomes increasingly dictated by the man who refuses to submit to prophecy or morality. Joseph's seed becomes increasingly aware that something has shifted in the county. The usual signs of control: absolute obedience, predictable fear, unquestioning devotion, are eroding, but he cannot determine why. Minor disruptions cascade into larger inconsistencies, exposing cracks in the hierarchy that previously seemed impervious. Micah's presence is subtle yet omnipresent, like a shadow moving quietly through the cult's operations. Joseph's attempts to reassert dominance are met with calm precision, not rebellion. He can see the changes, but the source remains elusive, and that uncertainty is corrosive. Fear and faith alone are no longer sufficient to maintain absolute authority. Micah also leverages the social dynamics within Eden's Gate to further destabilize operation. He observes which followers crave approval, which leaders operate out of fear, and which foot soldiers are capable of independent thought. By allowing small acts of defiance, encouraging minor miscommunications, and amplifying interpersonal tensions, he creates a county-wide network of instability. The Peggies are unaware that these fractures are not random, but deliberate. Every hesitation, every whispered doubt, and every subtle error strengthens Micah's understanding of human behavior and the limits of obedience. Hope County is evolving into a living battlefield with the rules of engagement written by a predator who has mastered both strategy and perception. Even terrain becomes a tool in his orchestration. Forests, rivers, hills, and abandoned structures are leveraged to channel the movements of Peggies and resistance alike. Resistance fighters find opportunities to strike in places where the cult believes they are safe. Patrols are diverted, checkpoints bypassed, and supply lines disrupted, all without a single overt directive from Micah. The environment itself amplifies the tension he has engineered, reinforcing the perception of unpredictability. To the outside observer, Hope County seems consumed by chaos. To Micah, every disturbance is the direct result of careful observation and manipulation, executed with patience and precision. The psychological impact of his manipulations intensifies. Peggies who previously believed in the infallibility of Joseph Seed begin to question their own judgment. Orders are interpreted differently, hesitation becomes common, and confidence falters in subtle but powerful ways. Even the lieutenants closest to Joseph find themselves second-guessing directives, sensing patterns they cannot articulate. The very culture of Eden's Gate, built on devotion and fear, is being subtly inverted. Obedience is no longer automatic. It is now contingent, fragile, and vulnerable to redirection. Micah has learned that the mind is the ultimate battlefield, and Hope County is a perfect testing ground. Resistance fighters, emboldened by gaps and inconsistencies, grow more daring. Their strikes become more strategic, their movements more confident. Yet every opportunity is carefully orchestrated by Micah to maintain overall control. He ensures that these victories feel earned and organic, reinforcing the perception that the county is a battleground independent of his influence. In reality, every maneuver, every opportunity, and every response is calculated, guiding both resistance and cult alike toward outcomes that strengthen his position. Chaos, under Micah's guidance, becomes a weapon as precise as any rifle or trap. Even Joseph Seed begins to recognize the pattern, though he cannot fully articulate it. Micah's influence has become pervasive yet invisible. The prophet senses the erosion of certainty, the shifting loyalty, and the mounting tension, but cannot pinpoint its origin. Every sermon, every patrol, every mission now carries the weight of uncertainty, and the psychological battlefield grows more complex with each passing day. Eden's Gate, a cult built on prophecy, obedience, and faith, is being quietly but methodically reshaped by a man who does not submit to faith, morality, or divine authority. Micah Bell has transformed Hope County into a controlled battlefield, with the perfect balance of chaos, pressure, and human behavior engineered to serve his strategic vision. In the midst of this orchestrated tension, Micah remains unassuming. He walks among the Peggies, observing and calculating, allowing the county to respond to the invisible hand guiding it. His interventions are subtle yet profound, shaping outcomes without ever revealing himself as the architect. Every hesitation, every error, and every act of defiance is recorded, studied, and incorporated into the larger strategy. Hope County is no longer a static landscape of control and obedience. It is alive with tension, a dynamic battlefield, and a testament to Micah's mastery of strategy, observation, and manipulation. The county now teeters on the edge of open conflict. Every road, every settlement, every patrol is part of the intricate web he has woven. Resistance forces move with confidence, cult forces hesitate, and Joseph Seed struggles to maintain the illusion of control. Every subtle shift, every calculated disruption, and every manipulated interaction has prepared the county for the inevitable eruptions that will define the next phase of the struggle. Micah Bell has created more than chaos. He has crafted a battlefield where every decision matters, every outcome is shaped by strategy, and the predator who thrives in uncertainty holds the ultimate advantage. Hope County itself has become a living instrument of conflict, a reflection of the invisible war between Micah Bell and Joseph Seed. Every hill, every valley, every abandoned homestead resonates with tension, uncertainty, and the quiet hum of orchestrated chaos. Followers are caught in the middle, unaware of the forces shaping their actions and reactions, yet fully impacted by them. The stage is set for escalation, for confrontation, and for the ultimate test of strategy, patience, and human cunning. Micah Bell has turned the entire county into his chessboard, and every piece, from the resistance to the Peggies, from the civilians to the leadership, is now in play. The battleground is complete. Micah Bell has engineered conditions so precise, so pervasive, that Hope County is now a theater of controlled chaos. Every action carries weight, every decision carries risk, and every outcome is part of a larger strategy that only he fully understands. Joseph Seed may still command loyalty, faith, and fear, but the true predator in the county now moves silently, calculating, and unbound. The stage is set for the final confrontation, and Hope County itself stands as both arena and weapon in the hands of a man who knows exactly how to dominate without overt confrontation, and who thrives where others are constrained by faith, fear, and obedience. By now, Hope County has been transformed completely under Micah Bell's quiet orchestration. What once was a place of rigid order enforced by sermons, fear, and blind devotion has become a living, unpredictable battlefield. Every hill, every river crossing, every back road and abandoned cabin serves as a potential point of conflict, carefully influenced by Micah's presence. Patrols move cautiously, anticipating traps or ambushes they cannot fully comprehend. Resistance fighters operate with confidence in ways that seem spontaneous but are meticulously guided by the gaps Micah has engineered. The county itself has become an instrument. Every element, terrain, human behavior, and cult structure alike, leveraged to maximize tension, unpredictability, and strategic advantage. Micah's genius lies in his understanding of both human nature and systems of control. He knows that fear alone cannot sustain obedience, and that faith, while powerful, is ultimately predictable. By exploiting uncertainty, hesitation, and doubt, he destabilizes the entire cult from within. Even Joseph Seed, whose ability to inspire and command has shaped the destiny of Eden's Gate, finds himself forced to respond to a threat he cannot see clearly. Every sermon, patrol, and ritual is now layered with the invisible presence of a man whose motives are inscrutable, whose loyalty is to himself alone, and whose instincts are honed to exploit every weakness. Joseph senses that his authority is slipping, yet every attempt to confront the problem is anticipated, observed, and neutralized with precision. The psychological toll on the Peggies is profound. They are caught between the familiar authority of Joseph Seed and the subtle, almost magnetic competence of Micah Bell. Some sense that the man walking among them is more reliable than the prophet's elaborate plans, more observant than the lieutenants, and more capable than their own instincts have prepared them for. Hesitation grows into doubt. Faith begins to erode where human perception and instinct have been quietly undermined. Small errors multiply as tension spreads, and minor deviations from protocol become catalysts for larger disruptions. The Peggies operate in fear, not of Micah, but of the unpredictable outcomes he has engineered. Micah also begins to manipulate the perception of the outside world. Resistance victories, minor skirmishes, and miscommunications within Eden's Gate are framed in ways that amplify doubt and uncertainty. Civilians report seeing patrols fail or disappear, hearing rumors of internal strife, or witnessing clashes that feel unscripted. Micah allows these perceptions to grow unchecked, knowing that belief in disorder can be as destabilizing as the actual events themselves. Hope County, in effect, begins to operate under two overlapping realities: the controlled chaos Micah orchestrates, and the perception of unpredictability that spreads faster than any bullet or patrol could. Joseph Seed's efforts to reassert dominance become increasingly desperate. He amplifies sermons, tightens rules, and commands more stringent obedience, but every reaction is anticipated. Micah has already ensured that the cult's mechanisms are flexible enough to survive minor crackdowns, yet unstable enough that every intervention only strengthens the sense of unpredictability. The illusion of control becomes fragile, and Joseph must rely on faith alone to maintain authority, while the very fabric of his command is quietly fraying around him. The resistance senses opportunity everywhere. Where once they moved cautiously and reacted defensively, they now strike with boldness, using gaps and errors that Micah has carefully curated. Micah doesn't lead these strikes directly. He merely sets the conditions so that resistance action seems both possible and natural. By controlling the environment, manipulating perception, and guiding outcomes subtly, he ensures that Hope County operates as a dynamic battlefield where outcomes favor the predator who understands both human behavior and strategic manipulation. Micah's manipulation of Eden's Gate extends to interpersonal relationships within the cult. Rivalries among lieutenants are allowed to fester, minor disagreements are amplified subtly, and loyalty becomes conditional rather than automatic. Peggies second-guess each other, hesitate to act without clear guidance, and start testing the boundaries of obedience, unaware that the boundaries themselves have been carefully engineered by Micah. The result is a fracturing of cohesion that does not require open confrontation. Chaos spreads like a virus, seeded and amplified by a man whose vision is singular and whose patience is unyielding. Even the natural environment becomes part of the battle. Forests conceal resistance movements, rivers act as barriers, and abandoned buildings serve as traps or staging areas. Every element of Hope County has been mapped and understood in a way that allows Micah to manipulate outcomes with minimal direct action. He does not fight the battles himself. He allows the forces around him to create conflict while ensuring that the consequences always feed back into his larger strategy. Every skirmish, every hesitation, every misstep is another note in the symphony of controlled chaos he has composed. By now, Eden's Gate is not simply destabilized, it is transformed. The prophet's authority is under constant, invisible challenge, while the resistance gains opportunities and confidence without ever recognizing the full extent of the orchestration behind their success. Civilian life is tense and unpredictable, influenced by the ebb and flow of calculated unrest. The county itself functions as a living battlefield, with every element, from terrain to human psychology to organizational structure, under the subtle, precise control of Micah Bell. The stage is set for the inevitable confrontation between Joseph Seed's faith-driven authority and Micah Bell's calculated, predator-like dominance. The county has been prepared, the actors positioned, and the outcomes preconditioned by careful observation, psychological insight, and patient manipulation. Micah has proven that the deadliest battlefield is not measured by bullets fired or lives lost, but by control, perception, and the ability to turn uncertainty into power. Every road, every settlement, every hill and valley has been subtly influenced to maximize strategic advantage. And Hope County now exists as a living testament to Micah's mastery of controlled chaos. In every sense, the county is ready for war, not just of bullets and fire, but of strategy, manipulation, and unseen influence. Micah Bell has turned Eden's Gate's home into a carefully balanced battlefield where every participant, from the highest lieutenant to the lowest Peggy, is caught in a game they cannot fully perceive. Every action, every hesitation, every decision now carries consequences orchestrated by a predator who thrives in uncertainty, dominates without direct confrontation, and bends an entire county to his will. Hope County has become a living, breathing battlefield, and Micah Bell is its invisible general, patient, relentless, and unyielding. The collision between belief and pragmatism, prophecy and cunning, is inevitable. The county quivers under the tension he has created. Joseph Seed, for all his sermons, faith, and fear-driven authority, now faces a man who answers to nothing but instinct and calculation. Every corner of Hope County has been prepared for the inevitable escalation. Every thread of tension woven into the fabric of the land, every interaction meticulously influenced. The stage is set. The battlefield is alive. And the man who understands fear, perception, and human behavior better than anyone else walks quietly among them, ready to seize the advantage at the moment the chaos reaches its peak. Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to walk through chaos and not just survive it, but become the center of it? Drop it in the comments. It's wild thinking about how some people move through the world untouched by the rules that bind the rest of us. Now, imagine this. Micah Bell, a man whose very presence radiates unpredictability. Standing in the heart of Hope County, the land he has reshaped into a battlefield of his own silent making. This is not a man with a moral compass, a guiding principle, or a higher calling. He does not believe in prophecy, in divine justice, or in loyalty beyond what serves him in the moment. Micah exists as a force of pure will, unbound by consequence, unrestrained by fear, and indifferent to the world's conventions. To call him dangerous is to underestimate the depth of his capacity for manipulation, chaos, and survival. He is a predator in the truest sense, and Hope County is now the perfect hunting ground. The county itself seems to respond to him as though it recognizes his nature. Forests, rivers, abandoned homesteads, and mountains all become extensions of his awareness, tools to amplify tension and chaos without a single overt action. Resistance movements strike with opportunities he has created. Cult forces falter and hesitate in ways he has orchestrated, and civilians are caught in an environment that is subtly, unnervingly unpredictable. Micah does not need to raise a gun to influence outcomes. His understanding of human psychology, environment, and timing turns every action, every hesitation, and every error into a weapon. He has become not just a part of Hope County, but the invisible hand shaping it. In the heart of Eden's Gate, the prophet begins to sense the presence of something he cannot foresee, something ungoverned by faith, prophecy, or obedience. Joseph Seed, a man whose power has been absolute for years, recognizes that Micah Bell is not just another enemy or obstacle. He is a phenomenon entirely outside the framework Joseph understands. Micah is not guided by salvation, fear, or retribution. He does not answer to the Father, to any ideology, or to any code beyond self-interest and instinct. That makes him uncontainable, unpredictable, and, in many ways, unstoppable. Every order Joseph gives, every threat he makes, every plan he attempts is subtly undermined by the predator moving silently among his people, observing, calculating, and exploiting weaknesses he cannot see. Micah thrives in the spaces between certainty and doubt. Where Joseph's authority relies on faith, structure, and fear, Micah exploits hesitation, unpredictability, and instinct. He does not need followers, and he does not need belief. His power comes from presence, perception, and the ability to act decisively in ways no one else anticipates. Cultists whisper about his efficiency, about the unnerving calm with which he moves, about the sense that outcomes seem to bend toward his will without explanation. The rumor becomes legend, and the legend becomes a psychological force that magnifies his influence beyond what he physically commands. As Hope County teeters on the edge of open conflict, Micah becomes both cause and consequence of every escalation. Resistance forces gain confidence in opportunities he engineers. Cult forces falter in response to conditions he manipulates, and the land itself seems alive with tension, ready to erupt at the slightest spark. Every misstep, every hesitation, and every unexpected outcome serves him. He does not lead battles, he shapes them. He does not demand loyalty. He bends behavior and perception until the illusion of choice aligns with his strategy. Micah Bell is a devil without a cause, a force unbound, a predator whose domain is uncertainty itself. This is a man who thrives where others are constrained. Soldiers fear for their lives in predictable ways. Followers obey from loyalty or fear, and civilians cling to routines that offer a semblance of safety. Micah recognizes the fragility of all these systems and dismantles them not with overt destruction, but with careful, patient observation and manipulation. Every interaction, from a casual glance to a seemingly minor suggestion, carries weight. Every act is deliberate. The county has become his chessboard, and he moves the pieces invisibly, anticipating reactions, exploiting weaknesses, and guiding outcomes without ever breaking the illusion of order. Even Joseph Seed, whose life has been dedicated to shaping minds and controlling outcomes through faith, begins to feel the limits of his power. Micah Bell is not a man to be reasoned with, converted, or feared in the conventional sense. He cannot be swayed by sermon or threat. He moves in patterns dictated by instinct and opportunity, exploiting the gaps between obedience and human behavior, between faith and doubt. Every layer of Eden's gate begins to unravel subtly, each fissure a testament to the predator who needs no cause beyond survival, manipulation, and mastery over the unpredictable. Micah's impact is both immediate and insidious. Resistance cells achieve victories that appear spontaneous, but are in reality carefully guided by his orchestration. Cult operations falter without explanation. Leaders hesitate and second-guess themselves. Civilians navigate an environment that is increasingly volatile and uncertain. Every interaction carries tension. Every decision carries weight. Micah's presence has transformed the county itself into a living battlefield where chaos is measured, fear is leveraged, and outcomes bend silently but inevitably toward him. Through all of this, Micah does not claim credit, does not announce dominance, and does not rely on fear alone. He relies on perception, calculation, and the fundamental unpredictability of human behavior. Eden's gate is destabilized not by rebellion, not by violence alone, but by the slow, deliberate erosion of certainty. Every follower, every leader, every resistance fighter is caught in the web he has spun, unable to fully perceive the forces guiding their actions. Hope County is now a field of controlled chaos, a battleground where the predator thrives in the absence of rules, loyalties, or conventional authority. The county itself has become a reflection of Micah's nature, ruthless, precise, patient, and untethered. Every road, every forest, every settlement echoes with the tension he has engineered. Resistance and cult alike are drawn into patterns he has set, executing actions they believe are spontaneous, but which ultimately reinforce his strategy. He does not need prophecy, morality, or faith. His cause is himself, his method is observation, and his weapon is the careful orchestration of the unpredictable. Micah Bell is a devil without a cause, a force whose presence alone reshapes the world around him, and a predator whose mastery of Hope County is complete in subtlety and terrifying in execution. This is the calm, the preparation, and the inevitability before the final storm. Micah Bell has proven that dominance does not require belief, loyalty, or morality, only patience, calculation, and the ability to move where others cannot predict. Eden's Gate, the Resistance, and the county itself have been transformed into instruments in his silent symphony of control and chaos. Hope County is alive with tension, every element meticulously positioned, and every heartbeat echoes the silent rule of a man who thrives where others are bound. Micah Bell, unbound by cause, faith, or consequence, stands at the center of it all. His shadow stretches across every forest, every river, every hill, and every town. Every decision he has influenced, every hesitation he has cultivated, and every chaos he has engineered converges toward a single, terrifying fact. Hope County is his battlefield, and no prophecy, no faith, no sermon can contain him. The predator walks among them, and the county itself has become both witness and weapon to his mastery of survival, manipulation, and the art of chaos. The brilliance of Micah Bell's strategy lies in its subtlety. He does not need to confront Joseph Seed directly to undermine him. He simply allows the cracks he has engineered to widen under the weight of tension, observation, and unpredictability. Eden's Gate continues to operate with outward appearances of order. Patrols march, sermons are delivered, rituals observed, but beneath the surface, obedience has become conditional, fractured by hesitation, doubt, and uncertainty. Micah does not force failure. He creates environments where failure becomes inevitable, where outcomes naturally bend toward his will. In this way, he exerts dominance without ever firing a bullet directly, and the county itself becomes a reflection of his methodical chaos. Resistance cells now act with unprecedented confidence. Previously, every action was calculated in fear of overwhelming retaliation. Now, they strike with opportunities they believe to be luck or coincidence, unaware that every opening, every weakness, and every misstep has been orchestrated by Micah's quiet hand. He watches from the shadows, cataloging reactions, observing adaptability, and refining his understanding of both the Peggies and the resistance. Every encounter, every skirmish, every unexpected victory or failure is recorded mentally, creating a complete picture of the county's strengths, weaknesses, and potential for further manipulation. His battlefield is not merely physical, it is psychological, systemic, and profoundly invisible. Joseph Seed feels the growing instability keenly. The prophet, accustomed to absolute control and unquestioning loyalty, senses that his authority is being challenged in ways that defy comprehension. Micah Bell does not confront him with overt violence or blasphemy. He challenges him with the quiet undermining of certainty. Every hesitation among lieutenants, every small deviation in procedure, every whisper of doubt among followers is a subtle blow to Joseph's perception of control. Faith alone, sermons alone, fear alone, these tools are no longer sufficient to maintain dominance in a county whose every action and reaction has been quietly influenced by a predator who answers to no God, no ideology, and no morality. The county itself becomes an extension of Micah's strategy. Forests, rivers, abandoned homesteads, and hidden valleys all serve as conduits for his influence. Patrols are delayed or diverted, supply routes subtly obstructed, and resistance fighters encounter opportunities that seem coincidental but are carefully premeditated. The environment amplifies tension, uncertainty, and potential for conflict. Civilians caught between the shifting power dynamics of the Peggies and the resistance experience the county as unpredictable and dangerous, further reinforcing the perception of chaos. In essence, Micah has turned Hope County itself into an active participant in his strategy, shaping outcomes without ever leaving the shadows. Even within the cult hierarchy, Micah's influence spreads insidiously. Rivalries among lieutenants flare, disagreements are amplified, and decisions are second-guessed. Small errors or miscommunications that once would have been overlooked now escalate into larger disruptions, weakening cohesion without revealing their true origin. Followers who once obeyed blindly now hesitate, their confidence eroded by the invisible tension Micah has introduced. Fear remains, but it is tempered by doubt and unpredictability, creating a psychological battlefield where every participant acts under stress, uncertainty, and subtle manipulation. Every interaction in the county serves his vision. He does not lead resistance operations, he does not confront Joseph openly. Yet every choice he makes, the positioning of people, the timing of actions, the allowance of missteps, shapes outcomes. Skirmishes occur at locations where terrain favors the resistance or exposes Peggy's weaknesses. Supply lines falter, patrols miss targets, and minor rebellions spread quietly, all within the framework of an invisible hand guiding events. Chaos is no longer random. It is measured, controlled, and orchestrated to perfection, reinforcing Micah Bell's dominance without a single overt declaration of power. The psychological weight of his presence affects everyone in the county. Cultists feel the pressure of unseen observation. Resistance fighters sense opportunities they cannot explain, and even Joseph Seed experiences the unsettling sensation that his authority is slipping in ways he cannot quantify. Micah has mastered the art of indirect influence, leveraging human behavior, perception, and uncertainty to dominate without exposing himself to direct threat. Hope County has become an ecosystem of tension, conflict, and calculated instability, all choreographed by a man who exists solely to survive, manipulate, and exploit the unpredictable. As Micah continues to operate, the scale of control he exerts grows. Every skirmish, every hesitation, and every subtle misstep contributes to a larger pattern, gradually eroding Joseph's authority while enhancing Micah's influence over the unfolding events. Resistance fighters gain the perception of autonomy and opportunity. Peggies falter without realizing why, and the environment itself becomes a tool of both opportunity and constraint. Every element of the county, terrain, people, and organization works in tandem to serve a silent, deliberate strategy. Micah Bell is no longer just a man in Hope County. He is the invisible axis around which chaos and order rotate, a predator without a cause whose mastery over unpredictability defines the rules of engagement. The county vibrates with tension under his influence. Every patrol, every interaction, and every decision is shaped subtly, making each action feel consequential. Fear, doubt, opportunity, and instinct all collide in a delicate, invisible web that only Micah fully understands. He does not need faith, loyalty, or morality to dominate. His power derives from observation, calculation, and the ability to manipulate the environment and its inhabitants without ever revealing his hand. Eden's Gate is destabilized, the resistance emboldened, and every layer of Hope County has become a component of his battlefield. Micah Bell exists in a space where rules, prophecy, and morality hold no sway. His dominance comes from control over perception, manipulation of outcomes, and patient orchestration of events. The county itself functions as a living extension of his strategy, reacting to his interventions in ways both subtle and profound. Resistance fighters strike when conditions are favorable, cultists hesitate when certainty is expected, and Joseph Seed's authority is tested at every turn. Every interaction, every choice, and every ripple of consequence reinforces Micah's position as the ultimate predator. Hope County is now a living testament to his mastery. Every road, every forest, every river, and every settlement reflects his influence. Chaos has been curated, tension has been amplified, and human behavior has been manipulated with precision. Micah has proven that dominance does not require overt aggression, belief, or ideology. Instead, it requires observation, patience, and the skill to exploit unpredictability. The county exists as a battlefield of his making, and every heartbeat within it carries the silent, unseen weight of a predator who thrives in uncertainty, dominates without confrontation, and bends the world to his will. The county now exists as a reflection of Micah Bell himself, unpredictable, patient, and unbound by morality or consequence. Every misstep by a Peggy, every hesitation by a lieutenant, every opportunistic strike by resistance fighters, all are threads in the web he has quietly woven. Micah has turned Hope County into a living mechanism where chaos and control coexist, and every outcome is subtly guided toward his advantage. The beauty of his influence lies in its invisibility. No one can trace the source of the disruptions, and yet everyone feels their impact. Eden's Gate operates under the illusion of authority. The resistance moves under the illusion of opportunity, and civilians navigate a county that has become unknowable and dangerous without ever realizing the true architect of this instability. Even Joseph Seed, for all his charisma, intelligence, and prophetic insight, cannot fully comprehend the predator in his midst. Every action Micah takes, every reaction he elicits, every calculated moment of hesitation or disruption serves to undermine the prophet's control. Joseph may perceive anomalies and inefficiencies, but the deeper patterns elude him. Micah operates outside the framework of faith and obedience, answering only to instinct, opportunity, and survival. This creates a constant tension, an invisible chessboard on which the movements of Joseph, his lieutenants, the resistance, and even the landscape itself are all influenced by one man who refuses to play by anyone else's rules. The psychological warfare Micah conducts is as important as any skirmish or strategic maneuver. By cultivating doubt and uncertainty, he destabilizes Eden's Gate from the inside without a single overt act of aggression. Cultists begin to question their own perceptions, wondering if missteps are divine tests or failures of obedience. Leaders hesitate, unsure how to respond to disruptions they cannot fully anticipate. Even the most devout foot soldiers begin to second-guess their actions, creating a feedback loop that amplifies tension and magnifies every ripple of chaos. Micah understands that controlling perception is often more powerful than controlling action, and he uses this principle to dominate a county that once seemed entirely governed by faith and fear. Every element of the county becomes a tool for his manipulation. Forests conceal movement, rivers shape travel, mountains dictate strategy, and abandoned homesteads serve as traps or staging areas. These natural features, combined with the carefully engineered behaviors of humans, allow Micah to orchestrate outcomes without ever revealing himself as the hand guiding them. Resistance fighters strike with confidence, cultists falter in ways that appear coincidental, and civilians experience a world that seems simultaneously familiar and threatening. The county itself is transformed into a battlefield that is alive with tension, unpredictability, and latent danger, all shaped by Micah's presence and calculation. Micah Bell's influence extends beyond mere survival or strategic advantage. He has created a system where every participant, Peggy, lieutenant, resistance fighter, and civilian alike, is unknowingly participating in a scenario he controls. Minor miscommunications, delayed patrols, and small operational failures all contribute to a larger pattern of chaos, which reinforces his dominance without exposing him to direct confrontation. He has proven that power does not require followers, ideology, or morality, only the ability to observe, calculate, and exploit the limits of human behavior. As the county teeters ever closer to open conflict, the predator thrives in the uncertainty he has cultivated. Resistance forces gain momentum as they exploit gaps he has engineered. Cultists hesitate when they should act decisively, and Joseph Seed feels his authority eroding in ways that defy comprehension. The interplay between faith-driven obedience and pragmatically calculated manipulation creates a dynamic battlefield in which outcomes are guided by anticipation and perception rather than brute force. Every event, every interaction, and every decision serves to reinforce the invisible power he wields over Hope County. The scale of his dominance is not immediately obvious. To casual observers, Hope County appears chaotic yet natural. Skirmishes seem spontaneous. Operational errors appear as coincidences, and resistance successes feel organic. Yet each moment has been influenced, each opportunity engineered, and each outcome subtly shaped by Micah's strategic foresight. He is everywhere and nowhere at once, a constant presence felt through the effects of his manipulation rather than through visible action. The county has become a living extension of his will, operating according to his understanding of human behavior, perception, and chaos. Even the strongest Peggies begin to sense the shift. Some whisper of an unseen force, a shadow that moves among them without allegiance, authority, or conscience. Leaders realize that outcomes no longer follow the rules they once understood. Missions fail or succeed in ways that cannot be predicted, and tension grows with every passing day. Civilians experience the environment as unpredictable, dangerous, and subtly manipulated, reinforcing the sense that the county itself is alive and hostile. Micah has achieved a rare form of control, influence without visibility, dominance without confrontation, and power without reliance on ideology or loyalty. Micah Bell exists in a space where morality, faith, and conventional authority hold no sway. He does not answer to prophecy, law, or allegiance. He answers only to his own instinct, calculation, and observation. Every misstep he allows, every reaction he anticipates, and every subtle disruption he engineers reinforces his dominance over the county. Hope County is no longer simply a location. It is a living, breathing battlefield shaped by strategy, human psychology, and controlled chaos. Resistance, cultists, and civilians alike move through a space where every action carries unseen consequences, and every decision subtly bends toward the predator who understands the rules of unpredictability better than anyone else. The county has become a mirror of Micah himself, unpredictable, calculating, and lethal in subtlety. Skirmishes, delays, hesitations, and victories all serve his larger strategy. Eden's Gate, for all its sermons and faith, is destabilized from within. The resistance operates in confidence guided by invisible handrails. Civilians navigate an environment that is both familiar and terrifying. Every element of Hope County, its geography, population, and hierarchy, has been transformed into instruments in a silent symphony of control, orchestrated by a man who thrives in chaos, dominates without confrontation, and bends reality to his will. Every heartbeat in Hope County now echoes with the unseen influence of Micah Bell. He is the calm in the eye of chaos, the silent predator whose strategy reshapes not only battles, but perception itself. Eden's Gate falters, resistance grows bolder, and the county itself becomes a living testament to his mastery of unpredictability. This is the apex of his influence: control without allegiance, power without loyalty, and dominance achieved not through force, but through observation, calculation, and the patient orchestration of the unpredictable. The stage is set for the final phase of his influence, where the predator, unbound by morality, ideology, or faith, will confront the county he has quietly reshaped into a battlefield. Every interaction, every hesitation, every opportunity has led to this moment. Hope County is alive with tension, the environment itself charged with anticipation, and the unseen predator moves among them, patient, calculating, and unstoppable. Micah Bell, the devil without a cause, has become the central force in a county defined by uncertainty, fear, and the inexorable pull of chaos, carefully, masterfully controlled. The culmination of Micah Bell's influence in Hope County is nothing short of absolute. Every corner of the county, every forest, valley, river crossing, and abandoned homestead serves as a stage for his subtle orchestration. Resistance fighters strike with an instinctive confidence that seems spontaneous, but is meticulously guided. Cultists falter in ways they cannot articulate, doubting their own judgment, questioning orders, and experiencing the first hints of fear toward a presence they cannot name. Even Joseph Seed, a man whose authority has long been unquestioned, struggles to regain control in the face of an invisible adversary who refuses to obey prophecy, morality, or loyalty. Micah Bell is everywhere without being seen, shaping outcomes, manipulating behavior, and bending the very fabric of the county to his will. What makes Micah so dangerous is not just his unpredictability, but the precision of his subtlety. He does not rely on brute force alone, though he is deadly when it is required. He moves among the chaos like a shadow, allowing events to unfold naturally while quietly ensuring they favor his objectives. Every hesitation, every misstep, every decision made by the Peggies, resistance fighters, or even civilians has been influenced by his presence. The county itself reacts as though alive, every element of terrain, weather, and human behavior aligned to magnify tension and unpredictability. It is a masterclass in controlled chaos, orchestrated by a man whose only allegiance is to himself. By now, Hope County has become a theater of psychological warfare as much as physical conflict. Fear is no longer singular or predictable. It is complex, layered, and amplified by uncertainty. Peggies doubt their faith, lieutenants question their orders, and civilians navigate a landscape in which every interaction carries unspoken risk. Resistance fighters move with boldness, exploiting opportunities Micah has engineered without ever realizing who is truly guiding the outcomes. Every move, every decision, and every reaction in the county has been manipulated, demonstrating that power does not always manifest in visible authority or overt action. Micah Bell has proven that dominance can be absolute without ever announcing itself. Even the most devout followers of Eden's Gate feel the shift in the county's energy. Whispered doubts, unexplained failures, and unaccountable losses erode their confidence in Joseph Seed's infallibility. The prophet, accustomed to near-perfect obedience, senses that he is losing control, yet every attempt to reassert it only reinforces Micah's invisible influence. By exploiting gaps in human perception, expectation, and instinct, Micah has destabilized the entire cult without a single direct confrontation. He is a predator who does not hunt in the open, yet his effect is undeniable. Eden's Gate is subtly, irreversibly fractured. The resistance thrives within this environment, emboldened by the gaps Micah has created and guided by the opportunities he allows. Each victory they claim reinforces the sense that chaos is natural and that their actions are decisive, when in truth they are moving along paths preordained by a master manipulator. Civilians, caught in the ebb and flow of conflict, perceive the county as unpredictable and dangerous, further intensifying the tension. Every skirmish, ambush, or misstep contributes to the grander design of controlled chaos that Micah has imposed on the landscape, its inhabitants, and its culture. Even Joseph Seed's most loyal lieutenants begin to falter. Patterns of hesitation, miscommunication, and doubt spread through the ranks, magnifying Micah's influence. The very faith that once held Eden's Gate together now becomes fragile under the weight of unpredictability. Micah has taught the county to operate in uncertainty, and the results are visible everywhere. Roads are contested, outposts are destabilized, and the atmosphere of controlled fear permeates every corner of Hope County. Every element, the terrain, the people, the organizational structure, has been transformed into instruments of strategy in the hands of a man who thrives on unpredictability. By the time the dust settles onto the final phase of Micah's orchestration, the county has been reshaped entirely. Eden's Gate is destabilized, the resistance emboldened, and every inhabitant has become a participant, wittingly or not, in the predator's game. Micah Bell has demonstrated that dominance requires no loyalty, no ideology, and no morality, only patience, observation, and a ruthless understanding of human nature. The county is no longer simply a place. It is a living battlefield, every corner infused with tension, unpredictability, and the silent, invisible hand of its true master. In the end, Micah Bell remains the apex predator. He moves through Hope County unbound, unnoticed, and unstoppable. Chaos, fear, opportunity, and perception all bend subtly but inexorably to his will. He is the man without a cause, the devil in the shadows, the orchestrator of a battlefield where every participant acts according to a pattern only he can foresee. The county exists as a testament to his mastery, a living, breathing landscape of tension and calculated instability shaped entirely by the predator who answers to nothing but himself. So what happens next? Well, that's where the story of Micah Bell and Hope County ends, at least for now. One thing is certain. Wherever chaos and opportunity collide, a man like Micah will be waiting, watching, and shaping the outcome in ways no one else could. Thank you for watching this deep dive into one of gaming's most unpredictable predators. If you enjoyed exploring this crossover with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new adventure across worlds. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous forces are the ones you can't see coming.